Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cooking with Colbath. My name is Julie Colbath. I'm the coordinator of Civic Engagement in the Office of Student Life here at UM-Dearborn. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you used the time that we would have had 2 weeks ago to go and vote if you hadn't voted by mail already. Thanksgiving week is upon us pretty soon, right? That's next week. So just as a heads up, the pantry will be closed all of next week, but we have extended hours this week, so we'll be open Wednesday and Thursday, the 18th and 19th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you are interested in making an appointment, please email UM-Dearborn Pantry at umich.edu and we can get you scheduled. Again, right, we're doing sort of like curbside pickup where you pick out what you want in your bag and then we'll pack it for you and bring it down to the front doors of the University Center. In spirit of Thanksgiving, we aren't going to make a meal today. We're going to make a dessert. So we're going to make some apple crisp because we have quite a few of the ingredients in the pantry and you probably have the rest of them at your house. So it calls for apples, which we have in the pantry at the moment, brown sugar, flour, cinnamon, butter, and oats. So we have oats at the pantry, right? And you probably already have some butter and some cinnamon and some flour at your house. Another good recipe that uses some pantry staples for Thanksgiving, if you are celebrating this year, is green bean casserole. I had thought about making it, but full disclosure, I am not a green bean fan. And so I was like, I don't want to have this in my house. I'm not going to eat it. But it's super easy to make. It just takes green beans, cream of mushroom soup, those French fried onions, some milk, and maybe some pepper, which we have basically all of that at the pantry. So if you are interested in making that or getting that, please note that when you fill out your order form. So this will be another episode that I'm filming beforehand, right? Because you don't need to just have me ramble for, let's see how long it cooks, 40 minutes while it cooks in the oven. But this is a super easy thing to make, very comforting, very fall, something I chose because I don't know when like apples go on sale at Meijer and they're like 40 cents a pound. Sometimes I find myself buying too many apples and not eating them quick enough, so it's an easy way to use up the apples that are in your fridge and make something that's really tasty and pretty easy. You could also use the apples to make applesauce, which is also easy and delicious. Okay, so we'll get started. I told you everything that we already need, so let me reposition you. Okay, so I've already, cool. I already cut up 4 apples, right? Because again, like, you don't always need to watch me cut up everything. So this bowl is just my scraps. So I was gonna put it outside for the birds. So this recipe says that you don't have to peel the apples. You definitely don't. It can be a personal preference. I know that, I could take it or leave it with peels. So I just figured I would show you how to peel it because a lot of other recipes, if you find them for apple crisp, do tell you to peel them. So one thing, if you have a vegetable peeler, it's easier that way, right? So you can you'll have to sort of get the skins to shake off, which I should just be putting them straight in my bowl. So you can just use a vegetable peeler to easily get the skins off. If you don't have a vegetable peeler, sometimes people have those like fancy apple peelers. I don't have one of those either, but you can definitely just use a knife. And so with a knife, you'll probably be getting a little bit more of the apple flesh off than you would with the peeler, right? Because that really gets like pretty close just getting the skin off. But you can easily, you know, and be very careful when you're doing this, but just like make cuts and just kind of drag your knife along to have it peel off. Just in little strips. Sometimes if you are very skilled, you know, you can probably peel it all in one fell swoop. I'm not always that way, so you can do it that way. You just have to be careful with your knife, but I'm just going to finish it off with the vegetable peeler. And you can use any kind of apple, right? All apples can have like different crispness, different sweetness, different tartness. But this one you can use anything. So these are, I think in my fridge right now I have Honeycrisp and Gala and then like a few other random ones. So these are all Honeycrisp apples because they were the oldest in my fridge, and so need to get used. But the nice thing about making like apple crisp or applesauce is, you know, there's some, probably can't see it very well, but right, there's like a bruise, so it's pretty easy to just cut that off. To not waste a whole apple, and make it into something tasty. I feel like everybody has their own way of cutting apples, so I'm just going to cut this in half so that we can create a flat surface, right? And so sometimes, you know, I'll cut it into a quarter and then try to like scoop out the core to really minimize the amount of like apple that I'm wasting. But when you're cutting them like this, you can easily kind of, you know, cut it into thirds a little bit, right, where you're going just around the core. And then, right, so like here's our core. You could also cut a little bit more off of that if you want. But you just want to slice, and here's a bruise that I'm just going to cut off. You want to make your slices pretty thin. I think this said like 1/8 of an inch, which is pretty thin, right? And so as long as you're relatively consistent, that's what matters. And you want to do that so that the apples will cook like evenly and quicker, because it can take a while for them to break down. So yeah, I'm just making a flat surface and then cutting thin slices of the apple, right? So it's not very big, and I'm just throwing it into my bowl. So we'll have 5 apples total when we are done. And I feel like, right, like medium apple is subjective. I feel like some apples are so big, so don't worry about the size so much. If you know, if it gets to be too much in the pan, you can always make a separate pan, or add more topping, or add more apples if it's not enough. So these are the kind of recipes that I appreciate, where it's like a little bit more flexible. Although I know sometimes ambiguity in recipes can be frustrating. Right. So we're just going to continue doing that. We'll cut off the core, right? So here's the rest of the core that we're just going to compost, and we'll finish. Thin slices, and then we're done. So you'll just repeat that so that you do that for all 5 apples. So I'm going to move my cutting board and my scraps away. Okay, let's see what's next. So next we're going to take all of our apples and we're going to combine them with some brown sugar, some flour, some cinnamon, and nutmeg if you want. This is when it's important to read the directions, right? Because, and the directions do say, or the ingredients do say, you know, you want this much brown sugar, you want it packed and divided, right? So you're going to use it in at least 2 different instances in the recipe. So I had already measured some of this out. So this weird looking bowl of things is a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, a tablespoon of flour, cinnamon, and I don't have nutmeg. It's not something that I normally have on hand, so I didn't add it, but I added, you don't have to, I added a little bit more cinnamon because I'm a cinnamon fan, so I feel like a lot of the times they underestimate how much cinnamon should be in a dish. So we're just going to add this. One day I'll get the camera right. So we are just going to sprinkle it over. And I just write, like when you normally add brown or measure out brown sugar, you pack it. And so I just kind of broke it up a little bit just for ease. So we're just going to mix this until it's sort of, you know, sort of evenly spread out. All of the apples are sort of coated in some level of this mix, which is a little bit tricky, right? Because I was just slicing the apples and then throwing them right in the bowl, so some of them I have to break up a little bit. If you mush them a little, it's not a big deal, right? They'll get sort of mushy in a good way in your pan when they bake. So this isn't quick, like easy kind of like make it, throw it in the oven, and then it's ready. It'd be really yummy served with a little bit of vanilla ice cream on top. But it's a nice dish for the holiday season, whether, you know, that's Thanksgiving coming up or some of the December holidays. And for the most part, this calls for whole wheat flour. I don't really have whole wheat flour, so I just use normal flour. It's no big deal. But you could probably do it gluten-free flour, and oats theoretically are gluten-free, but there's a lot of like cross-pollination, and so you could easily make this with like certified gluten-free oats if somebody has like a very extreme gluten allergy. Okay, mixed. Perfect. I'm gonna grab my pan. Alright, so for this recipe, it tells you to put it in a square pan, so it's either an 8x8 or a 9x9. Not a huge deal either way. So we're just going to spray this with some cooking spray. And if you don't have spray, a lot of the times I don't. Sometimes I'll just pour a little bit of oil onto a paper towel and just rub it around the pan. Or you can do the same thing with butter, right? Just take some butter and then make sure you grease the whole pan. Okay, so now we're just going to dump it. Well, let me make sure actually. Sometimes I get ahead of myself. So pour apple mixture into baking dish, spread evenly. It smells so good. I love cinnamon and I love apples. Alright, so we're just going to spread that out a little bit. And then I think we make our topping. So let me put this in the sink and then I'll grab another bowl. Okay, and we're just I'm gonna set this on the stove because we don't need it. Half a moment. I forgot to mention when I started, I had already preheated the oven to 350. So make sure you do that as your first step. Okay, so we're gonna be putting the toppings made of butter. which you could use, right, if somebody's dairy-free, you could use dairy-free butter. Brown sugar, flour, oats, and butter. Okay, so I already measured out some of my flour, so I'm just going to dump that in this bowl. And then let me use brown sugar, oats, and butter. Okay, so we already have our flour in here. I'm gonna add oats. So these are just like quick rolled oats. So it calls for 1.5 cups. This is a half cup. I think you probably could use like steel cut oats. They might just not, those normally take a long time to cook, so it might just have a little bit of a different texture. Okay. And then we need a half a cup of brown sugar. So again, and you can do this with a spoon, but I'm just going to do it with my hand. When you do brown sugar, right, you want to pack it. So we have it packed. And this is a 1/4 cup. So we'll need 2 of them. Cool. Let me grab a spoon quick. I think I'm going to end up mixing this with my hands anyway, because that's what it says to do. But sometimes brown sugar is a little bit sticky. So I'm just going to try to, mix some of it already, so then it's more wholly combined when we add our butter. So I know, right, like the division of the flour is sort of odd, right, because you use 1 tablespoon coated on the apples, and it calls for 1/2 cup. So you can just easily measure out 1/2 cup, just scoop out 1 tablespoon to put into the apple filling, and then add the rest of it in here. All right. So we're gonna dice up our butter into little cubes. So this is like typical when you're making like crusts like this, or like streusel topping where it's cold butter and you dice it into cubes and then mix it into here until it gets crumbly. So this says to use your hands, which you're obviously welcome to do. You can also use a fork if that's easier. And if you happen to have one, these are like, this is a pastry cutter, so it kind of is like a large fork in a circular manner. But then you can just go like this and it'll break up the butter. So it's not specific in its directions, it just says dice into smaller cubes. So normally I'll, cut the butter in half, flip it over, cut it in half again, so that more or less, you probably can't see it, right? But like I've made a cross. And so when I, for example, and then cut it that way, I have 4 little cubes of butter. So I'm just going to cut the butter and then just break it up with my hands into this bowl. And then we will mix it around with our fingers. Again, I know some people are weird about like, not that this is sticky, right? But Butter has a different texture. So if you're not comfortable using your hands, you can easily use a fork. But I think, you're we want the butter to mush a little bit and to integrate the oats and the flour and the brown sugar into it. It's a little bit of a process, right? Sometimes the butter likes to just stick to itself, but more or less we're just making, a crumbly, might be easier to do with my right hand, like a crumbly streusel sort of topping, and then the butter will like melt in a delicious way that is super tasty and kind of, caramelizing the apples. But one thing that I know that my mom does, I'm just going to use my pastry cutter, is sometimes she'll do fried apples, right? So you similarly will cut apples into thin slices, and then you'll, on the stove top with a frying pan, fry them in a little bit of butter and cinnamon. I don't know if she uses some sugar, probably a little bit. And I think, there are some recipes that use like normal sugar. Find something that you like and run with it. I chose this. I've never used this recipe before. Sometimes when I'm making apple crisp, I just fly by the seat of my pants. So it's nice to have something that we can actually put down, but I think Cooking Matters is like a really good organization that has tasty recipes on a budget. So I'm excited to try this out. I think if you would have cut, I would have cut smaller cubes, and maybe it integrates a little bit better. Not that my cubes were really big, and it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Like, it's kind of crummy. We can kind of break it up with our fingers as we spread it over the apples. So I'm going to push this a little bit in front. Here. Always working on a little bit of limited space. Don't need that anymore. So I'm going to take our apples and I'm just going to start putting the topping on, and you can just, kind of drizzle. I feel like drizzle isn't the right word. I don't know what the right word is at the moment. But drizzle it on there so that it evenly coats. And this feels, I don't know, I love topping, but this feels like a lot. But we'll do it anyway. Another way to use up apples, right, like I mentioned, applesauce is a really good way. If you put it in your oatmeal in the morning, that's also super tasty. This feels excessive. Let's see. Spread oat and flour mixture over apple mixture. Bake uncovered on middle rack for 40 minutes. All right. This feels like a lot. I followed the recipe. So if you don't like a lot of topping, use my experience to know that you could probably cut back a little bit and you'd be fine. But I always like making a bit of a mess. When it gets like a little bit crunchy, I don't know, it'll be good regardless. But just beware that it's a lot. All right. Cool. So now we're just going to put this in the oven. So let me scoot it over so I can open the oven. Cool. And now we'll see. So don't forget to set a timer. It's something that I do sometimes and then have to guesstimate what I've done. So we are going to bake it uncovered for 40 minutes or until the top is lightly browned or bubbly. So I will let that run, and it'll only, 40 minutes will magically turn into a few seconds for you. But when it's out, I'll show you what it looks like and tell you how it tastes. See you in a second. All right, y'all, we're back. It's done. It cooked for about 40 minutes. I kept it in just a couple minutes longer to give it a little bit of extra golden brownness. I can show you and we'll see if you can actually see it. My lighting isn't great, so I'm going to try to lift up my computer and show you overhead. Probably can't see it super great either, but it looks really good. My house smells delicious. I think, let's see if you can see the bottom maybe. Right, there's like, yeah, some good like cinnamony, hopefully caramelization a little bit on the bottom. So super easy with apples that you have. You can also substitute other fruits. So say you only have 3 apples, but you've got some berries in your fridge. Add those in as well. I know a lot of the times cobbler type, or what's this called? Ooh, having a total crisp. I feel like cobblers and crisps are the same in my mind for the most part. My mom does like fruit crisps all the time, right? Where it's just like a bunch of different berries often that she has in her freezer that she throws together and then puts, some sort of oat topping on. So I hope that you try it. I hope that you make it. I'll also find some other recipes that are utilizing, some staple pantry items for your Thanksgiving meals. Please remember to be safe as you are celebrating. Do whatever's comfortable for you. If you have any ideas, as always, on things that we can make on this show, please let me know. I was super excited to get the suggestion a couple months ago with the chicken tortilla soup. Always happy to try to find a recipe that's relatively easy, right, and utilizes some stuff that you have in your cupboard. Again, feel free to reach out if you have any suggestions, questions, comments, and we will see you in a couple weeks.